Good morning and welcome to Peace Out, where we are all learning together how to peace out. I'm practicing. I'm having lots of opportunities to practice. I don't know about you. We're kind of going to talk about that a little bit today. And the book of the week this week is going to be our Book of James study guide. This is actually the first, other than poetry books, this is the first actual study guide. It's definitely the first study guide I ever wrote, was the study of Book of James. And I see James as kind of a spiritual obstacle course, right? It like challenges you mentally, it challenges you spiritually, and it's like you got to navigate through what our religious mindsets have told us and figure out what James is talking about. And so this week's book of the week is the study guide for James. It's a great book, and the reason it's the study guide, the book of the week this week, is because I started reading James again this morning. I don't know if I just wanted my mind to be challenged, or my heart to be challenged, or my spiritual growth to be challenged, but it works pretty well every single time. James is just a rich book. So we're going to take a verse out of James every day this week. And so this week is chapter 1. Now, here was my first challenge, trying to figure out which verse or one passage out of chapter 1 to use for our devotion this morning for Peace Out, because there's so much in every chapter. So I encourage you, whether you get the study guide or not, take a few minutes and sit down and read the book of James. It's an intriguing book. James was written to a group of believers who were scattered. They were scattered because of persecution. So they were under the gun, so to speak. They were in the crosshairs of the enemy. The church was in upheaval because it was going. Jesus came onto the scene and changed their whole religious view. And religious people don't like that, right? So the church was being persecuted by the Jews, mostly because they didn't want this new religion. They didn't see Jesus as the Messiah. So that's a little bit of history. So this is who James is writing to. He's writing to people who have been ripped out of their homes, run out of their territories. They've had to relocate. They've had to be in hiding. They've had to try to stay safe in a very unsafe environment, right? So he's talking to these people. And listen to this. He says this to those Jewish Christians scattered among the nations, is what the New Living says. It says, I need my bifocals and my reading glasses, right? Dear brothers and sisters, whenever trouble comes your way, not if trouble ever comes your way, but whenever trouble comes your way, let it be an opportunity for joy. Now I'm like, okay, wait, you're writing to people who have had the opportunity for joy because they've had misfortune come their way. They've had difficult times come their way, right? They've had trouble come their way. And he's telling them to count it all joy. And so I stopped there for a minute because I was like, when we go through something, it's easier to look back and go, man, God really was working in that. But when we're in the middle of it, we're not like too excited. I'm not. Maybe you are excited when you're in the middle of something. And so I started thinking about, like, what if Daniel in the lion's den is going, hey, y'all, come on down. This is great. It's an adrenaline rush, right? If you ever get a chance to go to the lion's den, man, do it. Volunteer. Put your hand up because it's amazing. Because it wasn't all amazing. It was an amazing end result. And once he got in the lion's den, he knew that God had shut the mouths of the lion. But I am sure that moment right before he went in, he was like, okay, God, I'm coming to you. This is my day. And then he realized that God had intervened. The 3 Hebrew children walked through that fire. I don't even know if they saw the 4th man walking with them. And I'm pretty sure at the moment they were being thrown in, they weren't like, okay, everybody, come on. This is great. Awesome. There had to be that moment of, right? This is it. This is the moment I'm going to die. I'm sure Joseph wouldn't invite us to the prison cell. It was not a pretty place to live all those years while he waited for God to fulfill the promise he'd made. But at the same time, when he got through that, he could look back and go, wow, God orchestrated one thing after another to get me to the place where he promised I would be. So when we see trials now, and I've got a whole list, I know you've got yours, of situations and things I'm trying to navigate through, pray through, and do so without worrying and just piecing out because I know God's got this, right? And I know he's got me. But in the middle of it, I can't always see what God is orchestrating. I know what he promised. I know what he said. I know what the word says. So I'm going to go through it. But saying I have joy in the middle of it and wanting to invite everybody into that moment is not the top thing on my mind, right? But James is saying, count it joy. Count it joy when you face difficulties, when you face a virtual lion's den, when you face the real, very real emotional fires of life. Count it joy because God is still working. See, we talked about Genesis 1, last week or maybe the week before, a couple of weeks ago, and it said that there was chaos. The everything God had spoken and everything was coming together. He was creating the heavens and the earth, but it was chaotic. It was without form. It was void. There wasn't life there yet, and yet God was in that moment. And in those moments where we feel like we're in a lion's den, God is in that moment. In those moments that we feel like we're facing the firing squad of life, God is in that moment. If we feel like we're being pushed over to the fires of life, God is in that moment. If we feel like we're sitting in this is me, feel like we're sitting in a prison cell of life and just waiting, we know God promised, but man, we don't see it, right? It's okay. God is in that moment. If we're standing in the middle of a proverbial field and we see Goliath standing before us and we're not sure if we want to grab stones or run away, God is in that moment. He has not abandoned us. He's with us in the fire, in the flood, in the facing the giant, in the lion's den, in the fill in the blank for whatever you're going through right now. God is in it. We can find joy in that moment because we know that God has not abandoned us. Then listen to what James says in this. For when your faith is tried, not if perhaps you ever think about your faith being tested. No, when your faith is tested or tried, your endurance has a chance to grow. You don't build muscle without resistance. And that principle holds true across the board. When there's resistance, when you're facing something, you find yourself going, hey God, okay, look, I got this stuff going on and I don't know if it's my fault, your fault, somebody else's fault, but I need some help, because James goes on to say, ask for wisdom. And guess what happens when you ask for wisdom? In the middle of our situation, in the middle of our struggle, in the middle of the good times, in the middle of the confusing times, in the middle of the whatever fill in the blank times you are dealing with right now, ask for wisdom. God will give it. Your faith is being tested. Your endurance is being tested. Your ability to say, I'm going to find joy in this moment is being attested, right? And yet God is in that moment. So embrace the adrenaline rush of your tests and trials because God is there with you. We can look back at all of these stories and go, the angel of the Lord was in the lion's den with Daniel and closed the mouths of the lion. Didn't mean he didn't go through the den. Didn't mean he didn't spend the night, but he was safe. The 3 Hebrew children, Jesus was in the fire with them. Even whether they saw it or not, the king saw it. There's 4. Didn't we just throw 3 men in there? But there's 4 men in there. God was with them in that fire. They didn't avoid the fire, but they went through it because God was with them. We see Joseph was in the prison cell all those years, but God was there with him. God was still working behind the scenes, even though Joseph couldn't see it, couldn't feel it, couldn't perceive it, couldn't figure out how in the world God was going to rescue him from all his life that he had dealt with. But God was with him there, and God is with you in your stuff, no matter how hard it looks, how big it looks, how difficult it looks, how crazy it looks, how scary it looks, how fill in the blank it looks. God is with you, and that's enough. Knowing God's with me is enough to give me that adrenaline rush to trust him for today. And that's what I'm going to do. That's why I'm going to peace out, and I hope you peace out today too. Have a great day, you guys. I'll see you again tomorrow.